Heading into this season, I'm not sure anyone knew what to expect with the Clippers. After 3 games, there's still a lot of basketball to be played and a lot of questions to be answered, but we're starting to see a very clear approach. Because Ty Lue is still running the show, many of their half-court possessions start with some of his signature set actions. One thing they like to do is start a go-to scorer, such as Norman Powell, in the corner and bring him towards the ball with a couple of screens where he's not just a threat to shoot, but to attack open space. Typically, that means setting up Chicago action. Zubac is going to initiate from up top, while Harden sets a pin down for Powell to come receive a handoff. That way, the defense is already in rotation, making it easier to attack the middle of the floor. That's how they opened their season against Phoenix. The first play of the game was this exact set, and when Nurkic sits back in a deep drop, Powell's got an easy pull-up jumper. Part of what makes this so tough to defend is not only the fact that Powell's a multifaceted scorer, but that Zubac is a skilled passer. So in the event that the initial screen creates an opening for Harden to cut, they're able to take advantage. And speaking of Harden, he too can be on the receiving end of these Chicago actions, where he not only brings the multifaceted scoring, but that elite playmaking. Due to that passing ability, he's typically out on the perimeter setting up the offense though, and when it's not screening action, there's a pretty good chance he's entering the ball to Zubac in the low post. Zubac is a legit 7-footer with elite touch, which allows him to absolutely abuse mismatches. Even against a lengthier defender like KD, he's just too strong, and the only way to stop him from getting to a jump hook is to send him to the line. He isn't only effective in the post against favorable matchups though. He's got a serious back to the basket game, and the Clippers have turned it into a huge part of their offense. Here's one where he's working against Trayce Jackson-Davis, and as he spins over his right shoulder, Draymond blindsides him with a double. That's where the size and touch come in as he goes to a jump hook with his offhand. So they're constantly looking for ways to generate those paint touches for Zoo. One way they'll do that is with the use of a cross screen under the basket. As soon as he catches the ball, he's an immediate threat to score. Another way they'll do that is by playing with pace. He's often looking to seal off position in early offense, and who better than Harden to hit him with those pinpoint entry passes? In general, Zoo's a really dangerous rim runner in transition. If he catches the ball in close and the defense collapses, he's a quick enough decision maker to find the open man, in this case the sharpshooting Norman Powell. And although they are one of the slower teams in the league, I still do like a lot of what they do in these early offense situations. If Harden crosses half court and sees a matchup he likes, he'll waste no time attacking in isolation where he's still a very capable scorer. Then if the rest of the defense is out of sorts, still recovering to get back, sometimes they'll go to a real quick pick and roll. And it's this 2-man game between Harden and Zoo that's been the team's bread and butter. Even at age 35, in his 16th season, Harden remains one of the NBA's most surgical pick and roll operators, capable of countering any coverage. In Game 1 against Phoenix, he saw a lot of deep drop while his defender chased him off the line, meaning that he had to utilize that in-between space as a scorer. If he's got room to turn the corner and build downhill momentum, he may not be much of a threat to get to the rim anymore, but that floater from 5 to 10 feet is automatic. And if he doesn't come off that screen with speed, he can play a more methodical game, putting his defender in jail, hunting for open space, and rising up for a jumper. The goal here is to force the big into a game of cat and mouse. By hunting for open space, he's threatening that pull-up jumper, and as soon as the big commits, he's shoveling it to Zubac for an automatic advantage. Sometimes that advantage isn't obvious, but it's almost always there. On this one, Plumlee forces Harden to give up the ball while sliding back in front of Zubac's roll. But the advantage is actually how much space there is between Zoo and his defender, because in the short roll, that combination of size and strength is really tough to deal with. That's also why arguably his best game of the season came against the Nuggets, whose coverage is designed to give up those touches in the middle of the floor. What they like to do against pick and roll is put 2 on the ball while the low man comes over from the weak side early, and the goal is to force that ball handler into making a tough skip pass to the corner. This doesn't work against a player like Zoo though, because he'll just seal off the low man for an easy post up. Then in the event that they put 2 on the ball, the low man comes over early, and Harden doesn't really have an angle on the entry pass. He'll patiently wait to take advantage of that 2-on-1 on the weak side. This time he hits Jones up top, which creates a long closeout for the slasher to take advantage of. In the fourth quarter against Denver, the Clippers figured something out. They started setting up the pick and roll with 2 screens instead of 1. This time Jokic sits back and drops, so Harden attacks that space. Gordon sinks from the corner, leaving Powell open on a kickout, and he was on an absolute heater. He poured in 37 points in that game, and that included shot making of all varieties. This time Jokic hedges and recovers with no apparent advantage, only for the ball to get swung to Powell for a contested 3 that he just drills. So they ran this double screen pick and roll over and over again. Jokic again jumps out in a hedge, and Harden patiently waits to see how the rest of the defense reacts. He makes that tough cross-court skip to Powell in the corner, who immediately burns a closeout on a drive as he gets to a floater. Down 3 with a minute left, they ran it again. Same thing with the hedge, the patience as Harden reads the defense, but instead of the skip pass, Harden hits Coffee up top, who makes that extra swing pass to Powell. The scramble is nearly perfect, only for Powell to hit another tough shot. That takes us to Game 3 of the season in Golden State, where they tried to mix things up, seemingly playing a different coverage against every pick and roll to keep Harden guessing. They opened with drop, and like I mentioned, that's when Harden's looking to create those short roll opportunities for Zoo. If the low man sinks, he's capable of making that extra pass to the open shooter. That also stood out whenever the Warriors decided to outright trap Harden. He pulls 2 bodies out to the logo with him before hitting Zoo in the middle, creating a 4-on-3 advantage to attack. From there, all the big man has to do is make the right decisions. And he did so consistently. Here's one from the closing minutes where Harden again draws 2 before hitting Zoo in the middle, and instead of making that extra pass, he looks off to help before attacking a wide open paint. In order to avoid giving the offense a numbers advantage, the Warriors also did a lot of switching. And I actually think this will be something interesting to track as the season moves forward, because my theory is that with the right personnel, the best way to defend LA's pick and roll is actually with timely switches. But it has to be done with attention to detail, because if you're soft switching every screen and allowing Harden to get the matchup he wants, he's still too effective in isolation to just leave on an island. It starts with the pull-up 3-point shooting. If the second defender is late to get out, he'll use that space to rise up for a jumper every single time. Then if he's just straight up playing one-on-one, as we all know, he's constantly hunting for that signature step back 3, although it hasn't been on to start the season. If we take a look at Harden's off-the-dribble 3-point shooting since his MVP year, you'll notice that he's very consistently made about 35 to 38% of these looks, and that's on massive volume. And through 3 games this year, that number has been just a measly 14%, which I weirdly think bodes extremely well for both him and the team moving forward. It's a tiny sample of just 21 shot attempts, and there's zero doubt in my mind that it gets back to the consistent mean. So for the team to look as effective as they have, even with Harden shooting so far below his standard, is a huge plus. With that said, however, I do think this still speaks to a bigger issue in Harden's game at this point, and that's how reliant his scoring can be on whether or not the 3 ball is hitting. Because it hasn't been to start the season, his overall efficiency hasn't been up to par. That's partially why I believe effective switching is the best way to defend these pick and rolls, as the scoring can be hit or miss, while the passing is always surgical. Even with poor shooting numbers, he's been absolutely remarkable as a playmaker. He's leading the league at nearly 12 assists a game, although the turnovers have also been really high, so we'll have to see if he can sustain this many touches. I'm not over-indexing on those lost possessions though, because his ability to create for others has had a very clear impact on the team. Zubac has scored over 20 in all 3 games and is nearly doubling his previous career high of 11.7 points per game. I mentioned Powell's 37-point explosion. He's been playing the best basketball of his career, but even the less involved role guys like Derrick Jones Jr., Amir Coffey, and Chris Dunn have all found ways to produce playing off of Harden's ball-dominant style. So going back to what I said about switching and making him into a scorer, the version of Harden we see as an isolationist may just determine both the floor and ceiling of this team. He's nowhere near as explosive as he once was, so when he gets by a defender's hip, it's not uncommon to see them stay attached. And whenever he does get all the way around a defender, his rim finishing is basically non-existent as long as help is in proper position. However, that's not to say there hasn't been a lot to like. For one, if the help is even a fraction of a second late, he'll get to that soft touch floater. And if the help is a little bit too early, preparing for the floater, he'll turn it into a lob to the big man. I know I said his burst isn't what it once was, but that doesn't necessarily mean he isn't still a threat to consistently get into the defense. He's still an elite ball handler, he's still great at changing speeds, and if his defender tries to use contact to deter his attack, he's still got all those same tricks to generate free throws. It's only been 3 games, I get it. I'd be lying if I said the free throw numbers didn't intrigue me a lot though. He's currently averaging 10 free throw attempts every 75 possessions, which is the most he's had in a season since 2020 or his absolute peak. If he can sustain that sort of free throw rate when his 3-ball starts falling, we're talking about a very scary isolation scorer, especially now that he's been adding the mid-range as a consistent inside-the-arc counter. If teams take away Harden's passing lanes and force him to be a one-on-one scorer, can he produce efficient enough results to lift this team to a play-in or even a playoff appearance? History tells us yes. At his peak, he was an absolute outlier of an isolationist, so even with a big regression, he's remained one of the best in the league. If we use the last 3 years for a big sample, he averaged over 6 points a game in isolation on a very impressive 1.09 points per possession. Now, if we compare that to the isolation scoring of every player from last season, only 3 scored on more volume, and only 2 of those 3 were as efficient. Those 2 being Luka Doncic and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. So there's a lot to think about here. Can Harden sustain these free throw rates? If the pull-up 3-ball gets back to normal, can he really be a 25 to 30 point scorer at this point in his career? And if he does that, with Zubac and Powell playing the way they are, is that enough to make a push for the playoffs? I do still worry about him being the primary guy in a playoff series, as the reliance on jump shooting makes for a lot of volatility, meaning that the highs are really high and the lows pretty low. But that's where Kawhi Leonard comes in, because maybe, just maybe, he's back and ready to go come postseason time, and this team turns out to be a lot more dangerous than we initially thought. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and turn my post notifications on to be first on more content. If you're interested in my more in-depth research, make sure to check out the Hoop Venue podcast and my social media profiles. You can find those links in the description. Feel free to let me know down in the comments what you think of the Clippers. As always, I hope you all have a great day, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.